With the DNA we liberated from the grave desecration you call a museum, I have perfected the Saurianization process. You rice paper puppets will be given forms befitting Earth's dominant species.
You can rewrite DNA on the fly, and you're using it to turn people into dinosaurs? But with tech like that, you could cure cancer.
But I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs. If you've been in the comic book space for long enough, you've probably seen that panel floating around before. And yeah, it's a pretty good one. You want to hear the backstory behind it? The mastermind so confident in his villainous plan here is none other than Sauron, an excellent example of Marvel's cheesy, gimmicky villain of the week types, though maybe not one with the gimmicks that you would expect exactly. Sauron is very weird. Today, I'm gonna be talking about Sauron and his wildly convoluted origin story. Why? Purely because I want to, and what's the point of being a self-employed comic book YouTuber if I can't do a silly one every now and again? The 2-hour documentaries are great, don't get me wrong, I love doing those, but sometimes I just want to talk about a dinosaur man, so why not? Let's go! Though I am going to do a disclaimer right at the beginning. I know that Sauron is technically a pterosaur, and pterosaurs and dinosaurs are not classified in the exact same way. I promise I'm aware of this. But the comic books we're going to be going over do not always make that distinction, and therefore, for simplicity, and so I don't have to say dinosaurs and pterosaurs every time, I'm just going to say dinosaur for the remainder of this video. Again, I'm aware of the difference, you don't have to correct me in the comments about it, and if you do, may Khonshu, greatest of all the great gods, curse your entire bloodline. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, I can start talking about the origin of Sauron. Sauron's real name is Dr. Carl Lycos, and let me just put it this way, he's a comic book supervillain who got turned into a dinosaur man, and he has doctor in his name. So take a wild guess as to what happened here. Now that you all have a pretty safe bet in your heads as to roughly how Sauron ended up this way, I'll just go ahead and continue. Dr. Carl Lycos was a hypnotherapist. Wait, hypnotherapist? No, surely like biology or chemistry or something. He's a dinosaur man. The hell do you mean hypnotherapist? Yeah, so Sauron's origin story, it's dumb, it's real dumb. However stupid you think it's going to be, it is probably going to be worse. I'm just gonna take you through the comic where he first appears because that's really the only way I can present this, otherwise you'd think I was lying. Sauron's first appearance is technically in issue 59 of X-Men, like the original X-Men comic. He's a pretty old character. The reason I say technically there is while he is in issue 59, he's only there on the last page as a teaser for the next issue, so 60 is the one where he actually does stuff. During a fight against a couple of Sentinels, Havoc's powers overloaded and sent him into a state of shock. Hoping to wake him up and get him proper treatment, the rest of the team takes him to Dr. Lycos, who is apparently a former colleague of Professor X, though the circumstances under which they worked together have never really been explained. Whatever their affiliation was, it is apparently enough that the Doctor is trusted, even though that would turn out to be wrong, and the X-Men leave Havoc in his care. Once he's alone, Carl immediately starts monologuing about his origin, and so we just get it all laid out on the page here. Here we learn that Carl's father was a professional mountain guide, and as a young man, Carl would sometimes join on his dad's expeditions. This was usually fine until one fateful climb in Tierra del Fuego, where the daughter of their client would get separated from the group and go missing. The adults would quickly split up to search for her, and Carl would soon discover that the girl had wandered into a hidden tunnel and ended up in an ice cave full of pteranodons? Why were there a bunch of pteranodons flying around an ice cave in Tierra del Fuego? I have absolutely no idea. The comic does not address this for even a second. They are just there. But whatever, Carl gets an entire page where he's just beaten dinosaurs with a stick, and he apparently is able to fight enough of them off that they flee, and he saves the girl. In the process of his heroics, though, Carl does take some injuries, and one of the dinosaurs bites him. To return to my earlier bit, Take a wild guess as to where this is going now. That's right, Carl Lycos is bitten by a pteranodon and transformed into a vampire. Vampire? No. Werewolf, or dinosaur, or rare pteranodon, or whatever. Surely this is like a lycanthropy thing. Why is he a vampire? Why does getting bitten by a dinosaur turn him into a vampire? Once again, the comic makes no effort to explain this at all, and it's actually even weirder than you would think, which at this point is maybe the expected pattern. Carl is not a normal vampire, now he's an energy vampire. Being bitten by a pteranodon turned him into an energy vampire. Carl first discovers his newfound curse when he accidentally drains the life energy of his pet dog. The dog does survive this, actually, but is terrified of his owner and never goes near him again. And then this is just kind of how Carl lives for a long time after this. He does need to drain energy to survive, but he can do so in a non-lethal way, and so he has a relatively regular life, draining energy when he needs it, but not being a supervillain or anything like that. Though he does end up falling in love with the girl that he saved all those years ago, which I don't love. They are both adults at this point, so that's good, but there is also definitely an uncomfortable age gap between the two. I don't believe we know exactly how long it was between Carl getting bitten and the X-Men stuff, but during this period is when he becomes a doctor and opens his hypnotherapy practice, which is a legitimate clinic, but also a front for him to find victims that he can drain. Again, though, it's important to note that he is not a villain at this point. He's a little crazy, sure, but the comic does explicitly state that Dr. Lycos is just doing what he needs to survive. His patients come in, get put into a trance, he drains a little bit of energy while they're under, but then they leave weakened but with no lasting damage. This works enough in the short term, but is not a sustainable solution to his problem long term. Dr. Lycos needs more energy and is constantly looking into ways he could possibly acquire it, with mutants being one of his main ideas. He theorized that mutants contained more life energy than regular people, which, okay, sure, by X-Men standards, that's relatively normal enough, and this is evidently why Carl knew Professor X. They did some early mutant research together, but Carl was never actually able to test his theory, until Havoc showed up. Dr. Lycos excitedly begins the draining process and finds that his theory was correct. Draining a mutant gives him access to more energy than he's ever been able to take before. And he also learns that if he takes enough energy in one go, then he turns into a dinosaur man. I did warn you that this was going to be very, very dumb, and we're not even done yet, because the page where Lycos first transforms is incredible. I'm gonna do a whole reading of this, and I just need you to remember going in, he was not a villain up to this point. A bit insane because of his curse, sure, but not evil. And then this happens. I can bear no more. But even breaking contact does not stop the pain of surging muscles where once there were none, fierce talons of pain that scrape my back, bringing forth leathery wings. My body, my face, my very soul, they are changed, transformed, filled with a bursting, billowing power. Power for good or power for evil. And I choose evil! So he's a villain now. That's it. Seems like he was just kind of teetering on the edge of that decision anyway, if this is all it took. He's monologuing to himself and he goes, power for good or power for evil, and I choose evil. And that's that. And believe it or not, his monologue isn't even done there, because right after choosing evil in a surprisingly quick decision, Lycos continues, quote, an evil so great, so monumental, that only one name in all the annals of literature will contain it, the name of Tolkien's ultimate villain, that Dark Lord who personified evil, who was truly evil incarnate, the name of Sauron. That's right, folks, his name is not a coincidence. This guy is actively in universe named after the Tolkien villain. In fact, he named himself after the Tolkien villain. Now, before we move on, I will go ahead and address this. I am admittedly not a Lord of the Rings guy, but I'm pretty sure that the character's name in Tolkien is supposed to be pronounced Sauron, but also, they're not called dinosaurs, so I'm gonna go with the pun pronunciation of the name and call the Marvel villain Sauron for the rest of this, because it just feels right. Getting back to the actual storyline, after turning into his dinosaur form for the first time, Sauron just kind of flies away and then almost immediately gets into a fight with Angel. And it's during this fight that we go yet another layer stupider, because even after transforming into a Pteranodon man, he still has hypnotism powers. Not only that, his hypnotism abilities are actually better than they were. He just needs to look into somebody's eyes and he can make them see whatever he wants. And not only that, this is one of his main abilities in his early appearances. Sauron's primary two things during this era are being a hypnotist and draining life energy from his enemies. So he's really just a vampire villain that looks like a dinosaur because it's cool, I guess. Just to recap this again, Dr. Carl Lycos was a regular man who was bitten by a pteranodon, turned into an energy vampire, became a hypnotherapist, drained the life force out of a mutant, and then learned that if he drains mutants, he turns into a dinosaur man, which he then uses to fight the X-Men. These guys on the screen right here, this is the creative team behind this book. I don't know which of them were on drugs during the writing of this comic, but I'm gonna guess it was at least 2 out of 3 of them. Anyway, Sauron cannot maintain his dinosaur state forever. It is dependent on him having enough energy within his system, and if he gets low, he has to drain more or he reverts back to human form. Because of this, he ends up getting into a couple more fights with various members of the X-Men, and then bails when he is confronted by Tanya, the woman he fell in love with. The apparent reason for this is that he does not want Tanya to see the monster that he has become, saying that he didn't realize how fully the evil side of him was in command. Which, come on, dude, you flipped evil literally 2 seconds after getting superpowers and immediately named yourself after a Lord of the Rings villain. I feel like you're kind of enjoying this. The comic ends with Carl dramatically throwing himself off a cliff into the sea, presumed dead, though of course he does survive, and later pops up in the Savage Land, which, yeah, anyone who already knows what the Savage Land is was probably expecting it to make a quick appearance. For anyone who is not familiar with the Savage Land, it is one of the weirdest places on Marvel's version of Earth. The Savage Land is a little circle in Antarctica surrounded by a mountain range that, thanks to some ancient alien meddling, functions kind of like a wildlife preserve of prehistoric Earth all the way up to the present day. Is it a shameless excuse for Marvel creators to be able to write dinosaur stories with the superheroes? Yes, it absolutely is, but it's not one that I'm going to argue with because a lot of funny stuff happens in the Savage Land. Typically, anything dinosaur related is going to have its roots here, and so it's only natural that Sauron would eventually make his way there as well. Importantly though, he is human when he arrives at the Savage Land. There are enough animals for him to drain, but there aren't mutants readily available, so he cannot turn into his dinosaur form. Until the X-Men show up there because of an unrelated adventure and he gets his hands on Storm, and then abracadabra, Dino Man is back. This arc, which was also in the original X-Men, does elaborate a little bit on why his personality seems to swing so wildly. It seems that when he transforms into Sauron, he just turns evil. It's not like he's consumed by hunger or he needs more energy when he's in his empowered state. No, he's just like a normal guy when he's human, and then becomes a comedic supervillain when he changes. I don't really have a better explanation than that. It sounds dumb. It is truly how it's written, I promise. Probably due to just how shamelessly silly and fun Sauron's concept is, he quickly became a recurring antagonist for a bunch of superheroes, but usually X-Men, as he does have to drain the life force of mutants to gain his full powers. He is not a mutant, importantly. He just is affiliated with them because for some reason his power set is associated with them, which is never really elaborated other than they have more life energy or whatever. Shaky as that association is, though, it did lead to Sauron getting recruited into various mutant villain teams, most notably the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Though he did not join them of his own accord, he was regular human Carl Lycos at the time, and then the Brotherhood forced him to transform into Sauron again and drain Tanya's life force, killing his love interest in the process. And she stayed dead. So yeah, Sauron just killed her. Yikes. As you can guess by that storyline, during his early days, the contrast between Sauron and Lycos was an important part of his character, but as years and decades progressed, Carl Lycos became less and less a factor in the character as a whole, because, you know, hypnotizing Dinosaur Man is a much more interesting idea, especially for a cheesy villain of the week, and that's what most writers want to do with him. As such, his powers have evolved and shifted quite a bit over the decades, usually just gaining new ones for whatever storyline he happens to be in, sometimes quite literally, as Sauron has shown the ability to copy the powers of mutants that he drains, at least temporarily. How exactly that ability works has never really been defined. The first mention of it that I can find is in the New Avengers issue 6, where Wolverine mentions that Sauron can absorb mutant energy, and apparently that includes him being able to copy Wolverine's healing factor. This book doesn't really seem to understand Sauron's abilities in general though, as he can also breathe fire all of a sudden. Though this specific new ability might have its origins in the Weapon X program, there was an arc where Sauron was captured by them and experimented on, resulting in him becoming more animalistic and losing his hypnotism powers. Lame, that was the funniest part of his character, but gaining some extra energy manipulation in the process. After the Weapon X nonsense, he appears to be able to drain energy from sources other than people, and he can then expel that as a sort of electrical blast. So maybe if he absorbs heat energy, he can shoot out fire, and he can just kind of absorb and expel whatever energy he needs to. I don't know, that is the best explanation that I got. So for those of you keeping track of Sauron's powers at home, he is a Pteranodon man. As such, he is incredibly strong and fast and durable, and also he can fly. Plus, he's an energy vampire who can weaken his opponents by draining their life force, and he seems to be able to drain and expel other types of energy on a case-by-case basis. And he's also a hypnotist who can control his opponents' minds and perceptions by looking into their eyes. His power set is just all across the board, but there is one thing that is notably missing. Where on earth, I can hear you all asking, is the turning people into dinosaurs bit? That is arguably what this character is most known for, in the eyes of the general public at least, but it doesn't seem to be one of Sauron's many, many things, at least not yet. Well, guess what? There's a whole other layer to that panel I showed you right at the beginning. See, I wanted to do a fun, easy video for my last one of the year, something that was quick to produce and kind of silly, and Sauron, being the wild villain of the week that he is, was perfect for that. But he's also not really long enough to fill a video, at least not one of mine, and therefore I decided to pull a move in classic comic book fashion. This video is a Marvel 2-in-1. Now let's talk about Stegron. What, you thought Marvel only had one Dinosaur Man supervillain? Come on, no. Only 4 years after the debut of Sauron, Marvel would give us another guy with a very similar concept in Stegron, this time a Spider-Man villain. Now, with how surprisingly convoluted Sauron's origin was, I'm sure that Stegron's origin is going to be just as detailed, so let's begin with that. Stegron's real name is Dr. Vincent Stegron. So maybe it's not going to be quite as complex. This means that, again, for those keeping score at home, we have 2 dinosaur men, both with very similar names, but one of them who named himself after a classic literary villain, and the other one who is just using his regular human name, which happened to make him sound kind of like a dinosaur man already. Despite the stupidity of Dr. Stegron's name, though, his origin actually is pretty fun. Unlike Sauron, Dr. Stegron was a scientist working in a field that you would expect for a comic book supervillain. Specifically, he was a biochemist conducting experiments into cellular regeneration using reptile DNA. The formula developed ended up being far more intense than the experiment originally demanded, and when Dr. Stegron tested it on himself, it turned him into a dinosaur man. Now, that might sound very familiar to Spider-Man fans, because what I just described is basically shot for shot the origin of the Lizard. And yeah, that's actually the intent. Dr. Vincent Stegron was a lab assistant to Dr. Kurt Connors, working on a follow-up experiment to the original Lizard formula that Connors had developed. This was years after the original Lizard incident, at a time when Dr. Connors was back to human form, so he was conducting the experiments far more safely. But Dr. Stegron, on the other hand, he kind of liked the outcome of the original Lizard experiment, and figured that since now they were working with dinosaur DNA for some reason, that might turn out even better. Stegron became obsessed with the experiments and became convinced that if lizard extract could turn a man into a human lizard, then dinosaur extract could, well, you get my point. The comics are extremely self-aware about the fact that Stegron is just an intentionally evil lizard ripoff, and if you need solid proof of that, that line that I just told you, I took that directly from Stegron's first appearance. That is how Dr. Connors describes Stegron to Spider-Man, down to the, well, you get my point. After stealing the formula and transforming into a Stegosaurus man, Stegron flees to where else but the Savage Land, where he plans to raise an army of dinosaurs that he will use to take over the world. Pretty standard kind of cartoony villain plot, but one that does have some really funny implications with larger Spider-Man media. See, the Lizard in the main Marvel Comics universe is kind of just a monster most of the time. He's a reptilian werewolf in a way. Connors will transform into the Lizard and then go on some sort of mindless rampage, you know the drill. But this is not how he is represented in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. The live-action version of Lizard has a whole reptilian supremacy thing going on. When he's Dr. Connors, he is basically the same as the comics, but in his lizard state, he believes that he is a superior being, and he wants to transform everyone into lizards so that reptiles can rule the earth. That's not a comics lizard thing, that is a Stegron thing. Genuinely, the live-action version of Lizard is a better adaptation of Stegron than Kurt Connors. In Stegron's first comics appearance, though, he is not transforming people, at least not yet. His dinosaur army here is just regular dinosaurs that he picked up from the Savage Land. He is pursued there by Spider-Man and fought by both the Web Slinger and the premier hero of the Savage Land, Kazar. And they don't manage to stop him, actually. Stegron fully gets away in this comic. He successfully loads his airship full of dinosaurs and then flies it back to New York City, where he is opposed again by Spider-Man and also Black Panther of all characters. This fight goes exactly how you'd expect. It is Black Panther and Spider-Man fighting a bunch of dinosaurs in the middle of Manhattan. It's awesome. And there's a really funny shot in the middle of it where Spider-Man saves MJ from getting crushed, but this is before MJ knows his secret identity. And so to cover that he's actually concerned for her specifically, he decides in that moment to just be like incredibly mean to her so that she doesn't clock him as Peter, which is a wild choice, but it does work. Stegron is eventually brought down in a fittingly stupid rule of cool way. He and Spider-Man have a hand-to-hand brawl on top of a flying pterodactyl, and Stegron is eventually knocked off of it, landing in the Hudson and immediately sinking like a rock. This does take him off the board for a while, but Stegron of course survives, somehow going into a low metabolism hibernation-like state and then just drifting to shore eventually. Then, during his next villain plot, he doubles down on his dinosaur weirdness. This time, rather than sourcing dinosaurs naturally from the Savage Land, Stegron attacks the Natural History Museum with a ray gun that can bring dinosaur skeletons to life. The book also doubles down on the lizard men in a very literal way, as the point of this second Stegron arc is that Stegron and the lizard are attacking at the exact same time, meaning that Spider-Man has to deal with both of them. Reverting Connors to human form is easy enough, as Peter just develops a special web fluid that contains the cure for lizardism. Which is not a word that I made up, that is what the comic actually says. After yet another dinosaur fight, Stegron is again defeated by falling through the ice of a Central Park lake and sinking like a rock a second time. So Stegron's main weakness is just water. Much like Sauron, Stegron's general silliness and fun concept led to him becoming a recurring villain of the week, and with every one of his appearances, he would inch closer and closer to the whole turning people into dinosaurs bit. Maybe he was trying to clone a race of human and dinosaur hybrids, or he would unearth a magical artifact that caused people exposed to it to devolve in some way. All of this just got more and more out there until the fateful comic Spider-Man and the X-Men issue number 1. This comic starred Spider-Man as a guest teacher at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, which was the Xavier School equivalent at the time in 2014. After trying and failing to wrangle his class of mutant students, which yes, does include fan favorite Glob Herman, Peter takes the kids on a field trip to the New York Museum of Natural History. And there, they are met with both Stegron and Sauron. Yes, they're doing a team up, and this is the reason why I made the video a 2-in-1. The dynamic that these two have with each other is hilarious, because despite both being dinosaur men supervillains, they don't really have that much in common with each other. Sauron, after all, isn't even really a scientist. He has been referred to as a geneticist and biochemist, but this is only in Marvel handbooks, and the actual storylines with him don't bring that up that much. He is a hypnotherapist, that is his thing, and all of the science knowledge in this pair is with Stegron. They argue with each other the entire time. There are so many good panels in this little arc. This is another one of my favorites, where Sauron tells Stegron that he sounds like an effeminate cartoon snake, and their general dislike of each other is amplified by the fact that Sauron really likes to hear himself talk. He monologues constantly, and as you can guess, this finally is where the meme panel comes from. At the end of a very long speech, Spider-Man says, "With tech like that, you could cure cancer," and Sauron responds, "But I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs." Though there is a question with that though. What tech is he using? He's not using his own powers to do that, so naturally, he's using Stegron's technology. Stegron has invented a machine that can turn people into dinosaurs. Notably, not humanoid dinosaurs, it just turns people into regular-ass dinos. This leads to one of the reasons that I wanted to do this entire video in the first place, which is the reveal that the iconic meme panel has an immediate follow-up to the joke. Remember, Sauron is not using his own technology here. He's using something invented by Stegron and basically just taking credit for all of that. So right after the meme panel, we have this. "But I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs."
We want to turn people into dinosaurs.
Yes, we. That is the next panel. The meme for all these years, the thing that has made Sauron a relatively known character, is him stealing credit for Stegron's work, and then instantly after this, Stegron's like, "Hey dude, I made this. This is a plan we're doing together, bro." Making this even better, the icing on the cake, if you will, is that Sauron and Stegron being a dysfunctional partnership is what brings them down at the end of this arc. See, on the mutant team that Spider-Man was teaching, there was a character named Shark Girl. I shouldn't have to explain what Shark Girl's whole thing is. The name and picture of her alone should make it abundantly clear. Being a sort of prehistoric animal hybrid herself, when the Dino Bros capture the heroes and take them to their new base, which is a transformed Staten Island, Shark Girl defects and joins the villains. This is where things take a turn. See, there's not a lot of animal hybrids in the Marvel Universe, or to be more specific, there's not a lot of animal hybrids that aren't mammals. This means that for the few non-mammal hybrids, there aren't a lot of, options, if you catch my drift, and because of this, Sauron immediately falls in love with Shark Girl like the second he sees her. Now, to address the elephant in the room really quick, or mammoth in the room, or whatever, yes, Shark Girl is a student at the Jean Grey School. I don't actually know how old she is. It is never confirmed, and I will say, having gone back and read some of her earlier appearances, she is coded to be older than the rest of them. The Jean Grey School doesn't exactly follow a normal grading system, and she does refer to the other students as kids on a couple of occasions. So I'm going to assume that she's like 18 to 20 college age. Not that that makes this necessarily a lot better. There is still an age gap, but still. What does definitely make this story a lot better is that it is written to be creepy in a kind of parody way. This comic seems to be poking fun at vampire romances, since that is, after all, kind of what Sauron is. It's really clearly making fun of things like Twilight, where even though the characters appear younger, they are way too old to be dating the characters that they're dating. That's the bit here. And that bit is about to triple down, because Shark Girl did not actually flip sides here. She was just pretending to join the villains because it was kind of believable that she'd do so, and then she could betray them later, which she gets an opportunity to do in the funniest possible way. Stegron is in the process of trying to fix the dinosaur transformation machine so that it works on mutants in addition to regular humans, but it's taking too long, and eventually Sauron blows a fuse, leading to him getting into a fight with Spider-Man and most of the mutants, but Shark Girl stays behind and uses that chance to seduce the other lizard man. She gaslights the hell out of Stegron, playing into the fact that Sauron has been incredibly mean to him this entire time, and eventually flirts with him enough that she convinces him to show her how the transformation machine works. And as that is happening, Sauron flies back into the window, sees Stegron and Shark Girl getting closer to each other, and flips out again. This causes them to get into a huge fight, and before we see how that turned out, there is one more question we have to answer. Why was Stegron going along with this in the first place? The transformation machine is his invention, so what was he getting out of the deal? Well, it turns out that Sauron had shared his life-draining ability with Stegron as well. Since he's vampire-like, apparently that is something that he can transfer to others, and Sauron now has that power too. So their fight ends with them grappling and then simultaneously using their life drain powers on each other, meaning that they get counteracted and both frozen in place, taking each other out just because they were fighting over this shark woman who was manipulating them both. Shark Girl then uses the knowledge that she got from Stegron to reverse the transforming effects of the device, and the day is saved, in perhaps one of the wildest ways ever put to page. Oh, also, Glob Herman got turned into a baby Triceratops for a bit, and looking at him in this form, I feel like this idea was why this arc got written in the first place. Someone wanted to do Dinosaur Skeleton Glob and wrote this arc around that pitch. Since this, neither Sauron nor Stegron have been wildly important characters. They are, and pretty much always have been, silly villains of the week after all, but they do still appear in that capacity. Stegron most recently appeared in a one-shot called Kid Pool and Spider Boy, which you can get the vibe of this one from the cover alone. Sauron does appear a little bit more, likely because he can be used in two different ways. He is also a frequent villain of the week, but his connection with mutants runs so deep at this point that he may as well be one, and so he has appeared longer term in a couple of mutant storylines. Shortly before the iconic Stegron team-up, Sauron was actually the science teacher at the Hellfire Academy, which was like an evil equivalent to the Jean Grey School, and in the years since the team-up, his longest run was as a member of a team called X-Men Green? X-Men Green was a fairly minor and very unsanctioned X-Men group during the Krakoa era. They were a small team of eco-terrorists, essentially, and Sauron joined them because he was mad about humanity's use of oil. Not because it was polluting the planet, as much as because oil is largely made out of the decaying corpses of dinosaurs. Despite his relative unimportance at large scale though, Sauron is enough of an iconic weirdo villain that he does make appearances in other media. Most recently, he was in the new video game Marvel Cosmic Invasion as the boss of a Savage Land level, which is not something I was expecting, but I'm very here for it. Stegron does not appear in nearly as much, but I think we need a bit of justice for this dinosaur man. After all, Sauron was turned into a dinosaur against his will. Stegron was about that life completely willingly. He turned into this on purpose. Even the most iconic meme panel of these two is Sauron stealing the fame for Stegron's hard work. So the next time you see this panel floating around, laugh at it because it is funny, but remember, they want to turn people into dinosaurs. Give Stegron the credit that he is due. Thank you all so much for watching and for indulging my funny Dinosaur Man video. As usual, I hope you all enjoyed. The Inhumans feature was my big finale for 2025, but I wanted to do yet another video this month, and I figured if I was going to do one, it may as well be silly, so Sauron and Stegron 2-in-1 was an obvious choice. As always, I have a Patreon. If you go and check that out, you can find early and ad-free access to all of my videos, as well as a Patreon exclusive video every month. As of the end of 2025, there are 5 hours and counting of exclusive content on there, so it's well worth a look. My username there is the exact same as it is here. There's also a link to that in the description of this video and on my channel page. It's very easy to find, and for the last time this year, huge thank you to everyone who already supports me over there. It really does help me keep making these videos for you guys. Also, big shout out to Ruben Perez, the artist I work with for these videos. He drew the character that you've been watching talk at you for the last half hour, so go check out his work if you want to see more of this art style. And with that, Sir Superhero 2025 concludes with dinosaurs. What a way to go out. I'll see you all with more nonsense in 2026.